We'll give it just a little bit longer. I see there's still more people joining. All right, I think we'll probably get started.
Okay, great. So, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Peter Jackson. I'm Technical Services Consultant with BoviSync, and I'm here with Dr. David Cook, President and Founder of BoviSync. And today we're going to talk about something that's becoming more relevant on dairies with dairy teams and consultants, and how they should actually use LLMs or large language models. And the title says it really quite simple: stop using LLMs like Google. It's not generic AI hype talk, but we're actually going to focus on practical use, how to move from herd records, field context, and with some help from Ask BoviSync. So we aim for about 40 minutes, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end for 10 minutes. So if you've got any questions, by all means, please do let us have them at the end. David, do you want to give a quick overview of where we're going?
Yeah, so we got kind of 10 different sections. We'll try and shoot through each of them pretty quickly. But to start off, Peter's going to frame what LLMs are, why they're not search engines, and how to ask questions of them. Then I'm going to go on, show some of that same thinking of how that works with the Ask BoviSync feature, and then start talking about some of the mental models, how to think about these things, how to use them as a consultant, how to use them on a farm. Then we want to get into some of the strengths, limits, some use cases, and then towards the end, give you some different prompt patterns that you can try out and use. And yeah, then close with a few of the different kind of principles of how these systems work and how they're getting integrated into software.
Okay. So the biggest unlock, if you like, with LLMs, it's not necessarily the model itself. It's how the user phrases or asks the question. So, I mean, most people's first instinct is to try and treat it like Google or another search engine. There are more of them. I know I did at one time myself. Type in a short question, expect the answer, and move on. But that's not really where these tools are their strongest. The real value shows up when we treat large language models more like someone trying to help you organize an investigation. So here's a familiar question. So what causes high SCC? What causes high somatic cell count? Every dairy team will have asked this at some point. If you type that into a search engine or into an LLM, you'll get the familiar answer. And it'll probably mention mastitis, milking routine, environment, cow cleanliness, etc. None of that is wrong, but it is also not very useful by itself. It's more like a brochure level of information that we probably already know to some degree, but it does not know your herd. It doesn't know what changed, what's happened over time. It doesn't know whether this is a fresh cows or late lactation cows in a specific pen, a specific shifter involved in the parlor, or any other possible procedural breakdown. So the first lesson is this: vague questions tend to create generic answers. Okay. So now compare that with a consultant style version. Okay. So instead of asking what causes high SCC, we give the model actual working context, and it's all about this context. So let's ask it a different question, or the same question, but in a different way with more detail. So act as a dairy management consultant, give it some herd size, bulk tank SCC, how much has increased, Is there clinical mastitis, and where is it by days in milk? What bedding we're on? We changed milk shift supervisor, build a structural investigation plan. Okay, separate likely causes, data to review. This is a completely different question. And that is the point. This is not about asking a longer question for the sake of it. It's giving the model the same kind of context a consultant would probably ask for before giving some useful advice. So the LLM cannot read your mind. Okay, so that probably might be quite scary to some people. We're still waiting on that feature, or even very annoying, but yeah, it's a light bulb moment, if you like. So when you ask better questions, the output changes. So instead of a generic list of causes, you get a ranked hypothesis. You get a data review plan, you get questions for milking team, you get cow group segmentations. And the last part matters. Okay, it's real herd investigations jump into the first plausible explanation of one of the easiest ways that we can waste time when trying to investigate what's going on in a dairy. The LLM is useful here because it gives us, slows it all down and gives us case down and organizes. So the model didn't magically become smarter. It was the question that becomes smarter and better. David, so this is like where the concept starts to connect to Ask BoviSync.
Yeah, exactly. So this is where the idea becomes more general than an AI concept, and the shape of thinking applies to Ask BoviSync today. So this slide is showing a real hoof health investigation example. The answer isn't a generic lameness paragraph. It's organized around foot bath execution, immediate actions, working interpretation, and specific BoviSync reports to review. And that's the behavior that we want. So not tell me about lameness. Instead, it's help me organize this case. And I want to emphasize something that's important here. So Ask BoviSync is not supposed to be a slower report menu. If you already know what report you want and it's a couple of clicks away, just go straight to the report. The value here is when you're unsure of what report matters or how to interpret it or what the missing context is. So that's where Ask BoviSync becomes complementary to the herd management program rather than competing with it. So now I'm going to talk about how this lives inside the product. The problem with a general purpose LLM is that users often have to do all the framing. They have to say, act as a dairy consultant. You have to explain the herd, explain the problem, explain the reports, explain what output they want. And so if you're just using generic ChatGPT or Gemini, you have to do all of those things. And so with Ask BoviSync, it's designed to reduce that burden. And we also want to be clear about the job of what we're asking it to do. So it's not to replace the reports. The reports are still the source of truth. So Ask BoviSync helps you frame the questions, find the right reports, interpret the patterns, and decide what to check next. The good news is that you don't have to write the full consultant style prompt every time. So Ask BoviSync is set up by default to act as the dairy management consultant. That framing is built in. I think one of the really useful things that I've been told, or anecdotes, is think about these LLMs as the most knowledgeable and naive person that you've ever met that has virtually no memory. And so now take that person and put them on a beach, and a random person walks up to them and asks them, tell me about cows on pasture. They'll have one explanation. You put that same person in a room at ADSA, you're going to have a completely different answer. And if you put that same person at a farm in Denmark, you'd have a completely different answer again. And that's knowing nothing about the person, just the place that you're standing and a random person coming up to you. And so that's one of the things you have to think about with these LLMs is they don't have that context that's around them. And so you'll see that with ChatGPT. They have custom GPTs that you can use. This is something of a version of that, where it's going to help create some of that context. And then there's also playbooks. And so within Ask BoviSync, we've created 2 different personas and playbooks for them. And so those personas are primarily to be the dairy herd management expert and a BoviSync support expert. And so because all of those things are already built in behind the scenes, it makes it easier for you to ask questions and get the most useful advice out of it. And so it doesn't mean that you don't have any responsibility for asking good questions. The response you get is directly correlated to the question that you're asking. And so the context still matters, the records still matter, the field knowledge still matters a lot. Just the starting point here is a lot better. And so the assistant's already pointed toward dairy management work rather than generic interest style answers. And so if you ask a simple question like, what's my conception rate, but you already know what repro reports you should use, just open up the different reports in tabs and go through them. That's going to be the fastest way to get to your answer. But if you're unsure about different things and you want help thinking about it, so if I ask, my conception rate appears to be slipping, which reports should I look at first, and how should I separate cow factors, semen factors, technician factors, timing? If you don't know how to do all those things or the questions to ask, it can be helpful in asking those questions and helping you direct you to the right reports, and give you some context for how to frame and think about the data that's there. And it'll also provide its own interpretation of that data. And so that's what the product distinction is. So use reports for known answers, use Ask BoviSync for making better questions. So there's 4 real capabilities that we want to highlight. First, by default, it acts like a consultant. You don't have to remember to ask it to think like one, but you might ask it to think more like a repro specialist or a milk quality specialist. But if you don't, that's already built in. Second, it can guide users to the right report. And so it has a lot of context with this playbook of you asking different questions. It'll help guide you to different reports to make that easier. Third, users can add their own context. So when you're at a report, you can add that report into the chat. You can put in some of your own field observations. You can describe details about the farms, things that it doesn't know, things that BoviSync doesn't know. And then fourth is you can have this multi-turn conversation. So you can ask certain things. It might suggest a few different reports. You can go to those reports. Ones that you want to add into the chat, you can add those into the chat and keep iterating on that conversation. So this is some of what it feels like for a real consultant conversation. And so I think this slide kind of gives you the whole picture. So there's 3 sources of context. One is BoviSync reports and records. The second is what you've seen at the farm, what you saw, what you've heard, things that you are aware of that have changed. And third is everything that's not in the computer. So both of those 2 are you. And so you're going to know if there's staffing changes, if there's different equipment changes or facility changes, weather events that are happening, what the feeder told you was going on, the everyday reality of the farm. And these things can change that interpretation completely. And so the data may be in BoviSync, but that interpretation, especially of difficult things, is outside of that database.
And that's why the human element is absolutely central. A model can organize the case, but it can't know what the hoof trimmer retired unless someone tells it. It doesn't know that the night shift lead changed unless someone tells it. So, the human still owns the context that matters the most, and it's the context that drives the answer, the quality of the answer that we get. So the best use of asking Ask BoviSync is not give me a number I can already find. It's help me connect the number, the report, the trend, and what is actually happening on my farm.
So today users can attach reports and add context manually. So the future direction is Ask BoviSync will query records directly. So this means that the user you bring your questions and field knowledge, and instead of it suggesting the report and then you adding it into the chat, you could have it where it'll do this automatically. There'll be some cases that you don't want it to do that because that gets confused trying to give it too many different reports. Sometimes you want to be pretty directive on the reports that it wants to do. And so just to say, like, reiterate, this slide is directional. It's not a release date. Everything that we're doing, we just keep adding and keep iterating onto these systems. The chatbots aren't replacing the report engine. They're utilizing it. And so the filters and reports, the cohorts that are there, the drill down, all those things are still essential, and they're essential for the LLMs to operate. And so Ask BoviSync should help you navigate, summarize, interpret, act on that data, and really think of it as an efficiency tool. It's going to try and make you more efficient to do those things and to write out some of what the next actions in the case should be. So one of the things that you need to do is have the right mental model about it. And so this is one of the, I think, more important pieces of the presentation. And so, and just in general, as you use LLMs, everybody's trying to build a mental model of how do these things fit in, how do I use them, when do I trust them, when don't I trust them. And so if you get the mental model wrong, they'll either underuse it or you can overtrust it, are two of the big problems. And so the LLMs, they're not, while they're probably the most knowledgeable person you've ever talked to, they're not an oracle. It's not automatically an expert. It's not the consultant. So if you want to remember one line out of this section, it's this. So the LLM isn't the consultant. Think of it as the associate preparing the briefing packet. I use LLMs extensively. Partly, I started just forcing myself to use them to try and figure out to get this mental model right. Where do they make sense? Where don't they make sense? Where do they help me? Where don't they? And I think even last month, I don't buy into all the hype. I don't buy into the AGI. But personally, I had about $1,000 of tokens that I burned up using these tools last month. And I've really kind of come to think of them as, I don't know, interns, junior associates. They really do a great job putting different things together. So I think that's the best way that I can think about it, and it can make you a lot more efficient. But I also generally don't trust associates to make the final call on things unless they're fairly trivial. So I'm having it try to do things to create efficiency, and then I'm doing final review on it and making determination and changing it. So it helps you, trying to help you with that mental model to not use them incorrectly. One thing that you should be aware of is even on that associate briefing, I don't know if you've ever had to review a manuscript for somebody, but if somebody writes a paper and they start off in the wrong direction, you can keep iterating and changing and suggesting things, but it's hard to change the tracks. And so if some of the things starts off and it's on the wrong track, just start over entirely and lay out the tracks ahead of time, and then think of them as your associates or your interns. You turn them loose, they got it wrong, set the track right, reset, and then have them go after it. So if the data's, if it's already obvious and the reports are there, or it's generic, just use the report. Like, it'd be a waste of your time. It's not efficient if you already know what the answer are to ask it and offload the minimum amount of thinking that you're doing. So they're helpful when the work needs organization, when it needs some interpretation, preparation, follow through. So this is the working model. So step one, BoviSync stores what happened. Before you have LLMs, then you have the consultant, validating, prioritizing, or the person at the farm that's doing those things, and then the execution using BoviSync to track the execution. So now these LLMs are the intermediate step, and they can help summarize, draft, organize. And so they're adding those two white boxes in the center. It's still the same thing, but working together, you get some efficiency.
So now let's be a little bit blunt about where LLMs help and where they can hurt you. Excuse me. This is important because these tools are really quite persuasive. They write really well and they sound super confident, and confidence can be pretty dangerous if the underlying information is not quite there or even weak. So on the left-hand side, we've got all the good uses, summarizing records that you give it, drafting agendas, translating some SOPs, standard operating procedures, into different languages, organizing messy notes, generating questions. And then on the right side, these are what we would call danger zones. So the LLM doesn't know if your records are complete. It shouldn't be making treatment decisions, and it does not replace professional judgment. It's, they're there to augment, and it cannot guarantee accuracy without source of data. Don't understand the farm context? That is people, boots on the ground. That context is crucial, and that really matters. A recommendation could be technically correct, but actually operationally useless. I mean, if you know the exact report and get there in 5 seconds, we'll do that. But use the LLM when the task is bigger than just retrieval.
That's exactly the distinction that we want to make inside the product. So if Ask BoviSync becomes a slower way to get a number, that's not good enough. Just the stronger use case is that when it helps you understand which numbers matter, which reports support it, and what to ask.
So this is probably the line I would tape inside of everybody's head. LLMs are confident writers, not automatically correct advisors. They're built to produce fluent language, and that's probably not the same as truth. Polished answer can still be wrong, and a confident paragraph can still be missing a lot of the important facts. So we should use the fluency, but be careful to not be fooled by that.
One thing I was going to add here, and on that mental model, is I don't know how many of you are familiar with The Office, but I'm guessing most people have seen The Office. There was one episode, this is like 15 years ago, when GPS had first come out. And the GPS tells him to turn and go into the lake, and Michael turns and goes into the lake. And it was fun. I mean, it was comical because the answer was clear. Like, you shouldn't drive into the lake, but people have this mental model that computers are accurate and right, so it tells you to do it. You can trust that. In that case, the answer was clearly that you shouldn't drive into the lake. These things are very confident writers. It's going to take everyone a while to figure out how do you pick apart those things, and it's going to be one of the skills that people have to get good at, because it really kind of changes your mental model about computers. By default, the mental model is computers are trustworthy, accurate, and that's not true with these systems. They're very good liars at times.
So these are the 5 failure modes that you quite often see. So 1, it invents causes that sound plausible just to fill a hole. 2, gives you generic advice not tied to the farm. Number 3, it mixes facts with assumptions silently, so quietly. So, you've got a couple of facts in there, and then there's some assumptions. 4, and it treats missing data as a 0. And then 5, it produces something polished, fluent, but unfortunately wrong. So the fix is simple. Ask it to separate facts and any assumptions, missing data, and questions. And that one instruction can change the output, makes the model show it works in a way that a human can inspect. And that's pretty much the goal. Not blind trust, but output that can be scrutinized. So now that we've talked about limits, let's talk a little bit about records. So useful AI needs trusted, structured, and farm-specific context. So that is where BoviSync matters. So the LLM is only useful as the records it can reference. So if the records are incomplete, inconsistent, or not specific enough, the output will reflect that. So that does not mean that the tool has no value. It means we have to be honest about the input. It's the same old rubbish in, rubbish out. So the better the records, the better the briefing pack that we construct with Ask BoviSync. The worse the records are, the more the LLM has to guess. And guessing is exactly what we want to avoid at all costs. So without BoviSync data, you just get generic answers. Again, as I said before, brochure level advice, if you like. No specific cow, no specific cohort, no specific report. So it's really easy for a producer or manager to say, that does not sound like my farm. So with BoviSync data, the answer becomes operational. Specific reports with specific cohorts, really filtered down with protocol comparisons. Something you can actually bring into a farm meeting. So again, the goal's not to hide the report behind a chat window. The reports are the evidence. So the LLM helps organize the conversation around that evidence.
So this is one of the key product ideas. The same model can feel very different depending upon whether it's operating in a vacuum or from structured herd records. But we shouldn't confuse natural language with better workflow in every case. Sometimes clicking reports better, sometimes asking the assistant is better, and part of it is just try using it and you'll start to get a sense for where is this helpful, where is it not, and where it's not, try again in 2 months. These things keep evolving very quickly. The other thing that I'll mention on this slide is we talked a fair amount in the last slides about how it can be wrong, how they hallucinate these things. And so sometimes we'll hear people say that they have different guardrails or rules that prevent it from doing it, but then you also hear stories about how they jump those guardrails. So I think a much better term for it is playbooks. And so some of the playbooks that we have try to help prevent that, but there's no way to completely prevent that. So for the dairy team, the best starting place is usually daily, low-stakes workflow support. Don't start by asking the AI to solve the hardest problem on the dairy. Start with practical tasks where structure, clarity, consistency matters. So here be a few different places that you might want to try this out. So if there's some new workflows that you're doing, there may be a mobile app rollout with making some changes to protocols within the app. You can ask it questions. It'll help guide you to that, being that BoviSync support expert. Team meeting prep. So you can turn some of the notes you have into a clean briefing for team meetings. SOP translations. So if you have farm SOPs that you need translated, these things can be great at doing that. Training quizzes. As you have different employees or you just want to follow up, do people know what the protocols are to follow it? You could take those SOPs, put it in and ask it to generate some quizzes. And so you can get quizzes made in different languages and use that to help reinforce SOPs that you have. Different note cleanup. So you could take messy field observations and use it to consolidate it, put it together, create helpful, coherent thoughts there. And then missing follow-up, comparing what was prescribed against what was recorded. So they're not flashy things. It's to the point. They're useful. And you'll notice that even these ones here don't have any database lookups. So some of it you can be using that dairy herd management expert playbook that we have built in to try to use these different kinds of features and use cases. So you'll have to see where the assistant fits best.
Yeah, once people see the value in small daily workflows, then they're more likely to trust the process for larger investigations. So, yeah, small steps.
So this is an example of why refinement matters. Turn 1 is basic. How do I get the mobile app set up? So there's a basic answer there. And then another one you can have, give me a detailed process for setting up the BoviSync app for my breeders.
So now let's switch to consultants. So for a consultant, the value's not in the LLM, tells you what to think. The values that it organizes the case before you walk onto the dairy. That means less time gathering basics and more time using your judgment, in my opinion. So these are the 6 ways this earns its keep a little bit. Pre-visit briefing, what changed since the last visit, hoof, repro, fresh cows, milk quality, report shortlist for the question, 3 reports that you should open first, protocol compliance, an action item checklist. The consultant still owns interpretation, but the prep gets a lot better. And this is the distinction I keep coming back to. The chatbot's not a replacement for good reports or good consulting. It's there to help prepare and work around both. So if you think this hoof health example is a great illustration, the prompt says lameness treatments have increased 18% over 4 months. The herd is in free stalls. Foot bath is copper sulfate, trims monthly. Give it information. It suggests immediate actions like lesion level recording and separating lame trims from maintenance trims. Okay. It names some specific reports, lame trims by month, lesions by type, lame diagnosis by days in milk 7, trim chore summary. So that's really useful before a visit. But again, the consultant still makes the call. It's the LLM organizes the case, and it does not own the recommendation. The consultant owns the recommendation. So use LLM to prepare the question. Use your consultant to validate the answer. That's the safest framing and probably the most accurate one. And the LLM can help make the meeting better. It can make the consultant more prepared. And it can make the records easier to discuss. But at the end of the day, the professionals still validate what matters.
So now we'll move into some of the live demos. We're going to try and keep these somewhat tight. The goal isn't to show every possible feature. It's to show a repeatable engagement loop. So ask a better question, get a structured answer, pull the report, write reports, add field context, refine, then decide what to do next. So as we go through these, notice that the strongest examples are not simply what is my number questions. They're questions where the assistant helps us decide where to look and how to think about what we're finding. So this is the loop. Step 1, staff records events in BoviSync. Step 2, LLM summarizes and identifies gaps. Step 3, consultant gets better context. Step 4, the consultant prioritizes the actions. Step 5, BoviSync tracks that follow through. So this is a cycle that we want people to run monthly. It's not AI one-off trick. It's using AI to try to get better operational processes. So for this first demo, using that hoof health investigation, the prompt here is, act as a dairy hoof health consultant. The herd is housed in free stalls. Lameness treatments seem to have increased 18% over 4 months. Foot bath is copper sulfate 4 days a week. Trimming is monthly. Build an investigation plan with likely causes, data to review, employee observations, facility checks, and immediate actions. that structure matters. It's not asking why are the cows lame. We're asking for investigation plan with likely causes, data to review, employee observations, facility checks, and immediate actions.
Yeah, what I'd point out here is that this reads more like a prep document than a final answer, which is good. So it just adds more specific context to what it is that you're actually looking at. It gives you a way to enter the farm conversation with hopefully some better questions. So the value is not the assistant magically knows the cause. The value is that it helps organize what to check before we start making claims.
So the second demo is a producer style question. So I'm a dairy producer. I just had my test day back. How do I best review it in BoviSync? And then prompt 2 is what reports should I use? The standout here is not just an explanation. It's that BoviSync returns some ordered clickable URLs. The first report is the last milk test summary, and it goes down to some more detailed reports after that. And so this is a report discovery. Using that assistant helps get to those reports that are useful, and you could refine the questions if you had different concerns. It would guide you to some different reports. And this is where you should be honest. If you already know exactly which report you want, go open it. Don't type out a whole question, wait for an answer, and then click on it. That would be faster. So.
Yeah, the right reports are already on the table, and the conversation improves.
The third demo is a mobile app rollout for breeders. So again, notice the prompt pattern. The first question is vague. How do I set up the mobile app? So not very specific. So the second question is a bit more specific. Can you give me a detailed process for setting up the BoviSync mobile app for my breeders? So that second question produces real value. It's going to explain how to set up the protocols. It'll explain how to get the app for the breeders. It might tell you how to change the detail items on the phone. And so the better the question, the more it's able to better guide you. And when you don't know, you start off with a poor question, but try and ask more questions as you get further into it and learn. So this is a practical example for dairy teams. It's not high risk, it's implementation support. It's also a good example of the chatbot complementing the software. The mobile app does the work, and Ask BoviSync helps you get things set up.
So this fourth demo is one of the most important ones, I think, conceptually. I mean, let's continue the who felt case, but now we'll add some extra facts that are not necessarily in BoviSync. So a few things you should know about this farm before refining the plan. Our long-term hoof trimmer retired in February. Replacement crew comes weekly instead of every 10 days. We ran out of copper sulfate for 9 days in March and used a formalin alternative as backup. We replaced the warm rubber matting in the holding pen 5 weeks ago. New night shift parlor lead started 6 weeks ago. Locomotion scoring is unchanged. Those facts completely change the ranking of likely causes.
And so that conversation sharpens. So when we add that field knowledge, the trim cadence moves up, the footpath gap may explain a cohort, the mat replacement may be less likely as a primary cause. It shows this human layer. So Ask BoviSync can organize the case, but the operator or consultant closes the loop by adding what the records do not know. This is why we keep saying that it's complementary. So the records matter, the reports matter, but the human context is what turns that data into useful investigation. So you don't have to memorize prompts perfectly. It's not the point, but just a few repeatable structures that you can use after this. So first, summarize, turn raw records into structured findings, prepare, build a briefing for the meeting room or a farm visit, can translate, move across different languages or roles at the farm. So check follow through, compare what's prescribed with what's recorded, then create accountability, turn recommendations into checklists. And the visibility is, here's a visible example for here on the bottom. So summarize the last whatever time period of a certain event, separate confirmed facts, trends, missing date, and questions. And so that last piece is what Pete had showed before. Putting something like that into there where it's having the LLM separate those things out is a really good way to prevent hallucinations or making things up or misinterpreting different things. It'll give you its interpretation, but you can check those things.
Yeah, that's what makes it useful, I think, again, for consultants, not because it gives the final answer, but because it organizes the conversation. We're pushing 40 minutes, David. Do you want to? I think we should get through the guardrails, definitely. So where are we? Slide 38. Yeah. So we've just got to remember about these guardrails. The point's not to scare people away from LLMs. I mean, the point is to use them with confidence, but with discipline. There are 4 rules for the process. Don't let the LLM invent anything. If a number is not in the records that you provide, treat the LLM's number as a complete guess. Second, don't treat polished output as correct. Confident prose is not evidence. Always trace your claims to or the information that you get back to the source. Do not let the LLM stand in for a consultant. It's just there to organize a case. And label future product as future. Direct record querying is the direction we want to get to, but do not present it as a live functionality until it's live. So I would add practical 5th rule: do not use the chatbot as a slower way to do something BoviSync already does quickly. If the report is obvious, open the report. Use Ask BoviSync to help framing, navigate, interpret, and investigate. So these rules are not anti-AI, but they're how you should really use AI without tripping you up.
There's a few things here I just wanted to put in, just trying to give you guys on that mental model to think about how these things work. And so, and trying to separate a little bit of the marketing from other places. So there's only a handful of organizations in the world that train these foundational models. And so everybody else is building on top of them. And so when you see some marketing claim of, it's trained on your data, generally those are going to be different marketing claims. What they almost always mean is they're generating a playbook with some curated context, or they might be pulling some of your data in to answer a question, but they're not actually building the model off of that. If you share your data with OpenAI, Anthropic, things like that, they can use things to build it off of your data, but then it's for everybody. It's not specifically for you. And so these LLMs are it's the text generation engine that's behind the scenes, and then that text can do all kinds of different things in how you implement it. Another concept on this third piece is the vectors in and short memory out. And so what that means is these LLMs, it takes language, it'll take sentences, phrases, and it turns it into a vector. And a vector is a one-dimensional matrix, so it's just a whole bunch of numbers. And what they do is they're trying to find what's a pattern that is closely matched to this pattern of numbers. It finds the ones that are closest, it'll pull that in and use that to try to come up with the expectation of the next thing coming out. And so that's some of the basis of that short memory or short context window. And so while there's companies are working on long-term memory, that doesn't exist today. And so using that, how BoviSync, how other companies are integrating these LLMs into their systems is really like none of us are built, except for these few companies, they're building like the base model LLM. Companies are really working on how do you build the skills. So how can it do additional things? How could it directly query data? Building those playbooks, and then making it agentic. So the agentic is right now you ask it, and every time you're doing a turn, as you go towards agentic, you'll have the question. That's where it'll have a skill to pull some data in. It'll make a next iteration, and it can do multiple iterations without your input, and then returns you a final result. And so that's where BoviSync fits in, is as paying attention to all these different technologies. It's evolving very quickly and continuing to build and integrate these systems in and interface with different LLMs.
So that probably brings us up to Q&A, David.
Yeah, we're running along, so yeah.
Yeah, so we have actually got one in the chat. That's from Derek. Derek has asked, what model is BoviSync using?
So right now, interfaces to OpenAI. I think some of the next features, probably the first one would be a feedback piece, where you can do thumbs up, thumbs down, and basically that can help direct some of the development of where do people find these things to be useful, where do they not find them to be useful, and put more effort into places where there's use cases that they're helping. And then the second is being able to have it be selectable, where right now it's OpenAI, but sometimes you'll find Claude or Grok or Gemini have better answers. And so I think in the future, this will be a selectable thing.
Great. Anybody else got a question? They can raise a hand or drop a question in the chat, Q&A.
Well, while we wait for another question, I can just give a couple of commentary things of a few things I've taken note of as I've been building out this mental model and using these systems that aren't BoviSync related. So interrupt me if a question comes in.
Yeah.
Oh, there. So where do you?
There we go.
Yeah.
Where do we find BoviSync?
So in BoviSync, there's I don't know, what you call it. But there's like a little icon in the bottom left corner, and so you click on that, and bottom right corner, and it'll pop up, and then you can ask it. So, so a few things I've learned is, so it's not your friend, and especially if you use voice modes, it can be very strange because it is like talking to a person. I think adults do better with this, but don't let your kids have LLMs as their friends. I know that will go very poorly. I have also learned that talking nicely gets you better answers if you're in English. Other languages, that's not true. And if you tell it things like, this would be embarrassing to get wrong, or you really should think about this, those things can sometimes, often give you better answers. Don't use it for therapy with you and another person, but it is really helpful at giving you advice how to mediate things. So there's personal conflict at work, home, personal life. If it's you and another person, don't use it. It always tells you you're right. You'll ruin the relationship. If you're trying to help two colleagues, it could be a great way to ask questions of how to best mediate that. I wouldn't give up for good. Come back a couple months later and try it out. So, and a lot of this you just have to learn by doing it. So a couple years ago, I just said for a week, I'm going to do every single thing in my job using it. It slowed me down for the week, but I also found places where, hey, this is something where it works well, and it really helps build that mental model of where do things helpful, where aren't they. And the last one I had is just have it help you think. So it's easy to offload these things and have it try to do the thinking for you, but they're an intern level at best generally, and you really have to if you get good at asking it questions of how to ask you more questions, it can actually really sharpen your thinking and give you other way, make you think in different ways that can be helpful. So. Here, so another question. So can individual farms ask or opt out of Ask BoviSync if they're concerned about data policy? Oh, that's a great question. Okay. Today, you can't turn the feature off, but on the data privacy side, so right now we interface with OpenAI. So OpenAI doesn't get anything from BoviSync that you don't send. The terms of service on the contract is that they will not use that data. So by contract, they're not allowed to use it. They have a lot of commercial incentive to break those contracts as well. So if you're concerned about it, there's a contract that's in place that they can't use the data. But if you're concerned, I wouldn't necessarily trust it. The data, so your farm data, if you don't use it, it won't show up there. But yeah, if we find there's people that are concerned about it, or employees at the farm using it and sending data through it, even though that contract's in place, might be a great feature where you can just turn it off and not allow it when people are logged into your farm. So thanks for asking that one.
Yeah, great question, actually.
That anything else on that one, or does that satisfy the question?
Hopefully. Oh, Hannah's got a question in. I'm trying to build a cow moving tool. Does AI retain enough information on the rules I have told it to follow for cow moves, or do I need to continually tell it those rules within the same thread?
All right, no, that's a good question. So I think there's future features functionality that you'd have where there'd be things that are remembered like that within BoviSync. If you use ChatGPT or Gemini, like it can create memories. I think there'll be something like that where it'll have different memories where it can store some of those things for whether it's your personal workflows or for a farm. Today, no, you'd have to put it in each chat. But an important thing to know about how those chats work, every time that you add something into it, it starts at the very top of the conversation and goes all the way down to the end. And so if you've ever had a very long conversation with an LLM, they can get confused. And sometimes it's because of that memory piece and the context window gets to be, you're hitting the edges of that. And so you sometimes need to go back or summarize it, move on to a different one. And so in the same conversation, probably not. If you find you have to in the same conversation, probably means you need to start another conversation.
Derek's replied in the chat.
Yeah. So like the Quad Cowork, they have projects with memories. Maybe that's a good point. It doesn't make, like BoviSync isn't going to necessarily develop that technology, but Claude will, and other companies do, and every company is doing those things. And so some of those they build into their services, some of them are open source things. And so a lot of that is, as those tools become available, how do we incorporate it in? Because if we build it ourselves, there's companies that are hundreds of billions of dollars that are moving much faster. And if we do our own, by the time we have it released, we would be behind. So where there's a general functionality like that, we just need to work on incorporating them in.
It's great. Right. I think we got any more? Try and catch them all up. Eric, where can we find more info about BoviSync? I can't find it in the BoviSync Help Center.
Yep. So that'd be some great questions to ask use the Ask BoviSync, and still can't get it there, then try support. We have real humans that are have better answers. So
yeah, that actually give better, hopefully more truthful answers. Great.
all right.
Well,
thank you, everyone.
Thank you ever so much, everyone, for attending and your questions at the end. Yeah, it's been great. So thank you very much.
Yep. Bye.